So we're thinking and posing ourselves a question. What does IDKN bring to the table? I suppose could be a summary of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I'm really taken with the Chinese word. I also like adding in different
Yeah.
cultural philosophies
Yeah.
and
Well,
languages to it.
that's what your PhD and other studies are in. So
I'm just always turned on by it. I mean, the other day I found Darshan. Darshan is part of Hinduism, and it means to see, like the feeling you have, the way you see the image of a deity. So it's it's not just something you can only, it's sacrilegious if you're not talking about it in religious context, but it's seeing with all the senses so that you listen. I mean, seeing is with all senses is listening. Listening is with everything. And therefore, you are giving the same respect and reverence and devotion to the listening you have with another. So it's actually, it doesn't have to be religious in a traditional sense. It's the way you see others. And so even here with bringing the Chinese word in, and I don't actually know, something like Wei Shi, I don't know how it was said, but if the characters were danger and opportunity as the two characters in conflict, and she says, no, it's danger and inflection point, crucible moment that could bring different results.
Yeah.
That's IDKN moment, I think.
Yeah, that's sort of on the S-curve part, isn't it? When there's a sudden change of, and you know, you might have to change or not survive.
Yeah, I mean, look at the British Empire. Look at the U.S. Empire.
Well, you know, almost any empire, I'd say. You know, there's
Roman Empire, all of them, yeah,
all of them. You know, there's always some sort of thing that's like, aha, gotcha. You know, that's it, game over.
Arrogance, yeah,
yeah.
Because we can control nature, we can control everything. So we just stay on our path. Look how successful we are. And if we're not successful because we're smart, we at least have bigger guns and we can dominate. So stay that way. And eventually nature wins, or circumstances always do. We're at peak and somebody else. So if you don't recognize that inflection point early enough and make adaptations to your environment, you'll be eaten.
So IDKN, if you don't want to get eaten, get into IDKN. I don't know whether we could sell that, but it's just like, but it's earlier on we were talking about the sort of EQ and there's emotional intelligence and then cultural intelligence, and then how that parallels with IDKN.
Yeah, because it parallels self-awareness, self-management, meaning I'm aware of how I usually come across, or I'm aware of what I really value, and therefore ensure that I show up. Integrity. If I'm aware that that's me, but that doesn't work so well with somebody else. I mean, I may like to be in control, and that's just me. If I don't have EQ, I will go like, sorry, take it or leave it. That's me. That's just where I am. Get used to it. But if you have EQ, you can say, okay, I'm aware that in some cases, being in control is appropriate and controlling the situation is necessary. But in others, it doesn't work. And so, and I've expand that. So I can flex with me, but you're not in isolation. So if you're interacting with others, you're aware of what they find important, value. Are they an introvert, extrovert? You know, can go back to personality stuff, whatever. So you're like, oh, I'm aware that that's different. And now I can manage my relationship.
Yeah. And there's so much in business about relationship. I mean, a lot of people argue that you know, a huge proportion of business is about relationships all over
I
the
think
place.
everything.
Yeah. So EQ, in other words, is important for managing oneself. And then when you've got that awareness of yourself, then you can start looking at managing relationships with more, you know, this sort of emotional intelligence. And then based on that, then there's another level, which is the cultural intelligence, the CQ, isn't there?
Yeah, it's adding the complexity of culture. And as I believe, it's always there. It's just not called Germany or China,
Yes.
or
Yeah.
UK.
Yeah.
It can be called gender or generation or
Yeah.
sexual orientation,
Yeah.
or a profession.
So that extra layer, that kind of extra icing on that EQ cake, the CQ, is kind of the difference between managing within a context that we already are familiar with ourselves, or our own context, where, and to move up to the ability to manage the relationships with things that are slightly well, diverse, you know, slightly outside the box, slightly not in your general domain.
There are more complexity because there are more variables
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
notice or dangerously not notice, and it becomes easier to misinterpret.
Yeah.
I mean, we all know that when I mean, as a facilitator, you know, like, oh, somebody's really quiet, oh, not engaged or not understanding. And that's just my interpretation, because I like engagement and then
Yes.
visible engagement.
Yeah.
You know, what's interesting about it is, I think of it scaffolding. So it's like building out the skills, but actually it's also deepening.
Yeah.
Kind of part of vertical development. You know, you more deeply understand. There's more to success,
Yeah.
or being I don't know how to say it without sounding judgmental. You know, not like a nice person or an aware person or whatever, but it's greater depth in realizing there are more variables.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Another area in terms of the intercultural piece too is, think about how broad is your worldview.
Yeah.
The broader it is, the more you have space for all kinds of differences.
Yeah.
The narrower it is, the more you see only black, or maybe you don't see it all. Like, what difference?
Yeah. And that's the less broad you are, the quicker your empire is going to crumble.
Okay. Yeah, because you sure are not aware.
Yeah, you're not going to see that inflection point, that crisis, the bit that the popularism would say that the Chinese symbol is danger opportunity, but actually isn't.
Yeah, so the word conflict is made up of two characters. One means
is it crisis
danger.
or conflict? We were talking about crisis.
Crisis is better. Yes, I had the wrong word.
Crisis. Conflict is the next lesson along. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Yeah. Opportunity is actually danger, and inflection point or crucible moment.
Yeah.
That will make a difference.
Yes. And that brings us nicely segued smack into the middle of IDKN.
Yeah, I think that's really what we're all about. I really do now. I think that's the process. I mean, we're talking about something that not just describing what is. That's, yeah, great. That's interesting. But as a developmental tool, it's that point that we are really trying to help people notice and not immediately fear
Yeah. Yeah.
and go
Yeah.
into all the emotional reactions. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, a moment, but wait, I recognize it. I'm self-aware enough to know that it's not going to kill me. I can manage myself, therefore I can manage how I respond to it.
Yeah.
And I can see how it can be perceived differently by different people. And therefore I can manage relationships that come out of it.
Yeah.
But it's really that point, because that's your decision-making point. Do I go into the mud and,
Yeah.
I don't know what to do? Or do I say, okay, that's a lesson for me. That's the universe telling me, stop and notice.
Yeah. Yeah. And once somebody or anyone is familiar with the IDKN kind of landscape, model landscape, whatever we want to call it, then provided they recognize that sudden, that moment of that discomfort, that like, I don't know what to do, what's happening, when there's too much information coming in, don't know, can't make a decision, because there may not be a decision. I don't know what it is, but I know there's danger. And that is your inflection point. So if you recognize that, then you can change the course of events and how you react to what we call a response rather than a reaction.
It's like that guy I was telling you about, the entomologist.
Oh yes,
because
yeah.
When we react, we have that fear or that physical reaction. I don't know, and that deer in the headlights look. We're going to our basic instinct.
Yes.
Of self-protection.
Yeah.
And the danger that we perceive could be danger to our ego, because generally, how will I look?
Yes, exactly.
Really at the heart of so much.
There are other layers to that, of course. It might be, how do I look to colleagues if I've made a mistake, or gosh, my bank account's going to suddenly dwindle to, that's a real that's going to, because there might be some element of my social standing is
Exactly.
due to my the bank account, more or less, or the ability to increase the bank account.
Yeah. I mean, look at how many people end up in that. Think about financial. They're like, whoa, how will people see me if I can't afford stuff or can't keep up with others? So it's very much ego driven, where I'm afraid of losing out financially, but that's sitting on because how will I look to others or to myself?
Yeah.
So self-esteem will really take a hit.
Yeah. So recognizing the IDKN and knowing what happens within that landscape, whether you get into the swamp, which we know is stuck with a massive problem, SWAMP, and or excuse me, there we are. That's the danger of having mobile phones on your desk. Someone desperate to talk to me. They're in their IDKN moment. I know they got. Oh, get a phone, Geoff, quick. So anyway, that'll encourage them to just to think about it and their space of where they are, and then get into
the forced pause.
The power of the pause, which precurses the cliff face of courage and scaling that. So we go on. No, I can see you've got something. Come
on. Just reminded me of really of myself, in that sometimes when I yeah, I need to get something done. It's a deliverable. And I'm thinking, I don't know how to do this. Is this right? Is this wrong? And I automatically go thinking about who can I ask? I need to talk to this person. And I'm so finally I frustratingly try to figure something out myself, and then no, because I don't want to ask. Don't want to ask what if I should know this, how will they look at me? So finally I break down and I dash off an email like, um I can't figure this out. What does this mean? How should I do this? Whatever. And then I don't hear back immediately. So then I'm like, start digging around myself and doing more research and reading and all. And then I figure it out. So because there is that forced pause,
Yes.
I have so many examples of where I've then gone and figured it out myself.
Yeah.
Rather than I want a lifeline immediately.
Yes.
If I don't get immediate gratification, frustration, but then I go and figure it out. So there's something about not answering the phone that has an advantage.
I had to call the tax office about something I was stuck on, and I think I had to call them about 4 times, and I don't think I was on hold for less than 15 minutes each time, and I think the longest call was about 31 minutes, and I think the actual call only took 3 minutes for them to kind of tell me it's not that department, it's next department, because it kept on getting put on. But I just wonder whether they deliberately go, okay, yeah, well, someone's going to ring up, but actually if we put them on hold for 12.7 minutes, they'll that's the average mean time that people actually get fed up, and they go and think, actually I can solve this myself because I'm still looking on the internet. That's probably, yes. So they actually can save themselves a whole lot of money by actually not answering the phone, which flies in the face of customer service big time, but actually that's going to be quite
I'm not sure.
I
In
know.
this case, the tax office, I'm not sure if we
I
go
would.
back to
I wouldn't.
emotional intelligence. I
No,
don't know.
I wouldn't recommend that if you're actually trying to run a business. But if you're a government organisation, you might get away with it. I don't know. Especially if you don't solve the problem, you might get a fine or kind of in their bad books or something. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. So yeah. So I think the thing about we another thing that makes IDKN different is we're not saying do this and you'll be able to double the size of your business in 12 months. I mean, you might actually do that. You might do better. I mean, we've all seen clients that have done things like that. But it's more about broadening the potential of kind of the potential outcomes or the choices that you've got. And at the same time, reducing the number of times when you're just going into reaction and do something that actually causes the problem to get worse or the situation.
Relationships, and to me, everything comes down to relationships.
Yeah.
In a system, everything impacts and is impacted by everything else.
Yeah.
So, even in my own research, I was trying to find the factors that supported or impeded career advancement of Asian leaders in non-Asian global organizations. And I found through all the interviews, I found the data, found the factors that I could say this supports, this impedes. But actually, that's useless. Factors in isolation are a cop-out. So I could to an organization, it's about mobility, it's about leadership, and so then they can go, okay, we address this, they have a way to tick the box.
Yeah.
In fact, what's more supporting or impeding to progress is the relationship among the factors. So if, say, one of the factors that was supporting a leader's advancement was this tendency towards entrepreneurial spirit, taking risks, stepping up and challenging. But when they were running into an organization that was like a machine that's like, no, we don't do that here, it's that relationship between having a fire and having somebody put out the fire that caused a lack of success. It wasn't the factor by itself. It's only the interaction.
Yeah.
So I think it's always about the relationship, individual, at any level, team. If you think systems, it's all interrelated.
Yeah. So this is a bit beyond the tick box exercise. It's a whole nother level.
So what if somebody is, meets this inflection point, and the first instinctive reaction is, oh no, and really underneath all that is, how will I look? What will this change? How will I manage that? That will make me look bad if I don't do it. All this stuff probably going on in their head.
Yeah.
So find an answer immediately,
Yes.
as fast as possible to make it go away. But what if you're aware of the process and you're aware, so you're triggered and you wait, I'm not going in the mud yet. I know that that's one of my concerns, but what are the other variables in this? What are the other possible? And when you can go there, you're automatically using curiosity as opposed to fear, and you're looking, you're exploring what is. And if it's a relationship, you're going beyond the obvious to like, what have I not thought of?
Yeah.
And who else might give a new perspective that would be great to include too?
Yeah.
And so it's all that. So it's the process in response to that moment. That's where the power is.
Yeah. And also the moment of them, they're once familiar with this, realizing that there is a huge desire to resolve that tension of that inflection point in favor of not necessarily the problem, but in favor of making yourself feel better. And actually all that does is it kicks it further down the road, 5 minutes, 5 years, whatever, but it still keeps you in the swamp. You're still, and it'd probably get bigger, actually. The swamp gets bigger, still stuck with an even more massive problem. So in order to stop that, go on. We both have jump-in-itis, like, I got this idea. That's because we're on our own inflection points, and we always do.
I'm just thinking about the state of the world and how much is even more out of control than people ever really believed. The companies in particular, if we're talking business context, work to keep things in control. And now it's kind of becoming more and more evident that was all a delusion. And so what I was thinking about when you said that, just kick the can down the road, or, fix the problem immediately so it goes away. The unexpected impact, it may not be in an hour or a year or 10 years. It could be something even more, even know about. So it's that inflection point again, that this is a decision that could have all kinds of ramifications. Just gives more credence to the fact that if you can manage IDKN, I don't knowness, that you can make more, you have more to work with. Your resources are automatically huge.
Limitless. Much bigger. Yeah.
And then what you can come up with is never just fixed Band-Aid. It's
and I think I was just thinking that a lot of the time when inflection points arise, it's usually at the worst possible moment, and you probably don't have time. But and this probably happened before several times. I haven't got time. Let's just just do it. Just get it done. Which is what my brother was talking about the other day with one boss A. Just get it done. Boss B's like, I know this is going to be tricky. Let's get some resources in for you. But it also reminded me of Montgomery in the in the desert there, when he took over command of the desert operations in Northern Africa in World War II, one of the first things he did, as far as I remember from reading about it, was to take the generals and the commanding officers away from the front line, about 10 miles behind the front line, so they got some peace and quiet and could actually invoke the power of the pause and start discussing different options and strategy and tactics and so on, rather than to just solve that immediate battle. So there is a lesson, and I think that's part of the job of very senior managers, directors, and leaders, is actually to try and create that space for the power of the pause to be invoked, and all the things that we package inside that, and then to understand that as part of that landscape, then there's going to be something you've got to be courageous internally to do, to approach, or to change a way of thinking or a way of doing things, and then you get to the pastures of perspective, and then clarity, and then inner conviction and confidence and so on, based on all of those things that you go through within the IDKN landscape, rather than stay in the swamp. Who wants to stay in a smelly swamp after all? Come on, let's get out of it in an equitable and profitable way.
It's also forcing one to change perspective on the time frame. You must think more long term.
Yeah.
If you are able to navigate with IDKN, to use it, whatever the right word is with it. And because if you're going to problem solving and you try to make a fast decision to get rid of it, it's short term. It's for the now. And you don't even think about the future. Yeah. With IDKN, you're forced to slow down, but the result is the decision is better informed, and it is usually more broadly impactful, because so many more things have been considered. So there is a long-term nature to the thinking. And the other piece that's affected, and I know here I'm talking kind of more strategically or abstractly too, is that what you measure will be different. You're not going to measure in transactional numbers necessarily. That will maybe be one, a figure will be one of the metrics, but it won't be the only one. Because so much more has been considered, and so much more is obviously important. I'm reading Paul Poleman's book right now, Net Positive, and it's kind of along those same lines. You can't use the same very restrictive metrics. So many more things are important.
Well, I mean, when you're using the original metrics you use, they were set up because you had some system presumably that's going along, and the problems that come up are kind of quite manageable, and it's a yes no, or you've got ways of dealing with it. But when you get to something where you as you will do eventually, because of that inflection point, get to a point where you go, don't know, really don't know. Don't know who can help with this, haven't seen it before. It is literally that.
That's probably one of the biggest tools I could think one could take on, is listening to yourself when you hear yourself saying, I don't know. Anytime you hear yourself say, I don't know, stop and look at it.
That's right. And of course, naturally, if you've got a team or a board or other colleagues who you just hear saying, I don't know, whether it's a kind of almost throwaway comment, or whether it's a real kind of plea for help, you just register it and you go, and instead of bailing in, just sort of to either help out or push the problem away, you go, okay, right, here's the landscape. Where are we in the landscape? What do we do next? What's going to be the validity vector that we use to take us in the direction which is what it says on the tin, valid.
I think actually that's just a super important phrase that is, it goes back to it being an inflection point and the action that is a decision that will really make a difference. So when anyone, I mean, I can just imagine a team manager team trying to talk through something, and somebody says, I don't know, to be able to hear that and say, and dig into it.
Yeah.
Ask more questions rather than you don't know, then you instead, move on.
Yeah.
Rather, like, so what part is unclear, or what part is sort of, I just don't know, or okay, so we don't know that, what do we know, and sort of just using it as a pathway to more.
And I mean that's true, and some people might do that, or say that they do that naturally, but there's a little bit more to it, because we are there's a propensity, I think, to say, oh, somebody said they don't know, let's find the solution, let's see who can help and has, gets to know. But what we're saying as well is that there may not be anybody who knows the solution. There may not be a set of tools that you can apply to this not knowing. And how do you get through that? That's where the real mud is, where that's when you're thinking, oh, kind of, this is going to be a damaging to me or myself or my company or my colleagues or whatever in some way. How do you deal with that? And what we're saying is
how do you deal with spam risk constantly?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. You know
what it does to us, though, I think, for people who like to be right, who like to know, who feel that they should know, I'm one of them.
Yeah, me too.
Then I don't know is, in other words, saying, oh, let me teach you.
Yes. Yeah.
Let me help you know.
That's
let
right.
me share what I know. And so now you also know. Now you understand. And that's not the best response.
Let me mansplain this to you. Yes. Yeah. No, it's beyond that. It's in the mud and the swamp, and as we call it in this landscape, is beyond this. The even that of, oh yeah, I can explain this to you. It is, well, when you can't,
Well, what if we think about everything being a relationship? What does that response, based on those little words, I don't know, what does that do to the relationship?
What, saying, hey, I'll help you out, or I'll do it, or
here, you don't know, here, let me explain.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
What does it do to the relationship?
Yeah, that's a closing down. Or at least it's an attempt to help, but actually, I think it closes down. But it also it basically says, well, you're obviously not competent, and where's the trust? I mean, it comes back to Francis Fry's trust triangle again, doesn't it? The kind of, it's not terribly empathetic to start with.
Well, one thing I think about is it's a power trip.
Well, that's true. Yes.
So if I'm a manager and somebody says to me, I don't know, and I try to explain, it automatically builds an unequal relationship. Yeah. And if we think about it organizationally, it's hegemony, it's colonialization. Yeah. Like, we have the answer, we have the best, we will save you. But individually, it automatically creates some kind of distance.
Well, it can do. I think, I mean, it might be well appropriate in certain levels of management and, educational places to be able to, because it's set up like that, we understand that we go to the boss. But it's when you get to the very high levels where there may not be anybody who knows. They say to you, I don't know, and you think, crikey, I don't know either. So, there's immediate kind of like, I don't know, who can I blame, or what have you tried, or blah blah blah. instead of saying, "Oh, well, I don't know either, and I don't think anybody knows," and let's just go through the IDKN landscape that we
what follows, I don't know. It's not I don't know itself.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I even think about teaching, and when somebody says I don't know, answers a question with I don't know. The worst thing is to say, oh, who does know? Which I know I've been guilty of, definitely. But maybe it's like hyphens, if it's a technical problem, there is one right answer. 5 + 5, who knows the answer? I know.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. All right. Since there is just one, we can deal with that.
Yeah.
But like the flip side I always use, blank plus blank equals 10. Who knows the answer?
Yeah.
Infinite number.
Yeah. I'm minded to think about my my first boss after my apprenticeship, and I had a glorious role in problem solving in production engineering in a big aircraft components factory, and a few times I'd say to my boss, I'd say, well, I don't know how to solve this, and what and he'd go, I give up. How are you going to solve it?
But think about coaching.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's
whenever would say you don't know. Well, here, let me tell you what you should do. Okay, I've been guilty of that one too.
Yes.
But,
I think we all
but it's really not ideal, right? It's like what the question even. Well, what would you do if you did know? Or what else might be possible? Who knows? It's more like advancing the thinking,
yes,
as opposed to staking a claim on what the right action should be.
Yeah, and what you should do. Yeah,
should is optimal word. You're shoulding all over yourself. So if we were thinking, what does IDKN promise? Would you feel comfortable saying, with the facility you develop in using IDKN as a method, you will, I don't know, what's the promise? Can you promise? Could you really promise anything?
Well, I would think the first thing is that you will get a different perspective on a vast range of different incidents, or I mean, because we did a list some time ago about, just for fun, IDKN and empathy, IDKN and sorry.
Change management.
Change management. Yes, that's right. That's one of your favourite ones. So, yeah, you can, where in all of these different areas, you're going to get to a point where you don't know, and what do you do then? What are you making up? What direction is that going to take you in, and is that going to be the optimum outcome? But at the very least, it does is to take you to a spot where you, in that power of the pause, where you're sitting and thinking about it and having a level conversation about it without the the sword over your head of the emotional reaction.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a foundation to a different approach to, well, I could say almost everything.
Yeah, I'm still trying to articulate it, because I know there is power and validity in it. But I guess my hesitation with promising is that I have no power over promising that.
No, no, no.
You can learn anything, but what you do with it is
Yes.
that. So maybe I can promise that if you become adept with IDKN as a process, you have the potential to see more and do more.
Yes.
Because you have more resources.
Yeah.
Personal resources, external resources, whatever. You have more resources with which to develop the optimal choice, not the reactive knee-jerk choice.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not an easy path. However, if you can go around the iterations of it, every time you go, oh, I don't know, whether it's some sort of small little thing, and then you experience, you go, oh yeah, that's this what comes next. Now I can have some choices here. The more you do it, I think the more effective you become as an individual and as a team member and as a team leader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you create the climate where I don't know is a positive thing.
Yeah,
there is the upside to I don't know.
Yeah.
It is the more creative space.
Yeah.
And we talk about psychological safety, or creating the climate where not knowing is just a point on the path of learning.
Yeah. So again,
it's not a knower.
IDKN and psychological safety is another subtopic, but an important one, because and if you don't get familiar with the sort of what we're proposing as the model and the landscape, then it's harder, I think, to be able to advance, especially when you've got to do something outside the box.
Yeah, because you're automatically afraid of it because you don't know what will happen.
Yeah.
And I think I've told you too about someone I worked with. Woman wanted her team to be more innovative.
Yeah.
And she was like, but and I just don't know why we're not. I mean, we are so good and we have such clear processes that everybody's familiar with, and our standards are so high. We have such quality for what we do. Why is the team not more innovative? And in working with her, it became apparent that it's because she's the one who has such a strong hold on maintaining these high standards and this strict process, because that's where we have been successful. She's afraid to try anything new that would disrupt how they have been doing things that have been so successful. So it's not that her team is not innovative. It's her own fear that was in the way, that didn't create the climate where others could just try new things.
Yeah.
So it's really a cascading kind of thing. If I'm okay with not knowing, going like, that's cool, we've got something more to learn. But how of course is that? Not everybody knows everything about everything. Things continually change. So you might say, well, we tried that already, but that was 10 years ago, and the conditions of the world were totally different. So, and the people involved totally different. So how can you say we tried it before, therefore it won't work? Like, just bad logic.
Yeah.
So the idea that if I can create this climate where you don't know, that's cool. Like, well, let's play with this.
Yeah.
Then no one is afraid to say, I don't know. And therefore we don't miss opportunities.
Yeah. And of course the flip side is if what we're not talking about is to say, well, I don't know, and we're just going to jump anyway into the void. We sort of make another disastrous choice, because that isn't IDKN as we're kind of proposing it.
Oh no, it's not going blindly, but it's recognizing what might be coloring your perception and what's in your lens.
Yeah.
So you remove the fear part as much as possible,
Yeah.
and recognize it that it's just one color, not the only one. But the idea too of jumping without knowing, you it's partly having the courage to jump with not knowing completely.
Yes. Yeah. And that's why we
You
have
wait till
things.
you know.
Yeah. The sort
It's
of
gone.
validity vector type thing that we were
You have
talking
the
about, the
compass.
compass. Yeah. So it's pretty much in the right direction. Yeah.
Well, when your compass is based on I believe what's in my compass is um, not just me, not just what I believe, but my belief is that everybody's voice should be heard, for example.
Mm.
So if that's what's driving me, if that's what I see, that's where we're going, then that influences my actions and what kind of decisions I make and the processes I use. So if my validity vector says that's the direction, it's not your opinion or my opinion, it's here, the combination, it's the we, then that's what I'm going for. And that's what drives me. I don't have to have a road sign to know when it's there or not. The compass comes from inside.
Yeah. Fabulous. Great. Well, that's how we kick around our concepts and ideas and develop things. And so for anybody that's been watching this, do check out idkn.org, and Geoff at idkn.org, Kathleen at idkn.org. Subscribe to something if we've got a button for it or whatever. And call us up and get involved in the conversation. And we will be running kind of sandboxes. Tell us about sandboxes, Kathleen.
I was thinking of saying that in that we're going to be running sandboxes, which are a space to play with such ideas, because as is evident, we don't know all the answers, but we have a process for figuring out options and trying them on and testing them out. And that's part of that beta mindset. It's not fixed. So in a sandbox, we have an issue, we have a question, we have a concern, and we just play with it. And we have collective wisdom because everybody who's there has the same ideas. There is no such thing as one is the expert.
Yeah.
So if you think about a sandbox, just like a regular sandbox, it's bounded, it's safe, there's no sharp edges, it's soft sand, you play in it, you bring toys, you create castles, you knock them down. Same thing. So we're going to run sandboxes and invite people to join our sandboxes and have a play with how it works for them.
And that's an open event. And then we have other things like one-to-one executive leadership development coaching, and small group coaching, and the training about how the model actually works and how it looks and how to use it.
I think the last thing that's become very evident is we just are not good at finding the elevator speech.
Yeah, there isn't, because there isn't, because it's a void of not knowing, isn't it? Yeah.
Always said
it's like trying to describe what vanilla ice cream tastes like. You gotta just try it. So that's you can come and we'll send you a vanilla ice cream if you've never had one, or come to IDKN and our sandbox. But we'd love to talk to leadership development experts. We'd like to talk to talent managers. We'd like to talk to CEOs. We'd like to talk to people who lead in all sorts of organizations, because we think we've got something that you could be interested in and you could use to your betterment and your team's betterment, your organization's betterment, and the planet, etc. There's no end to it. There we are. That's a big sales pitch. I think we better leave it there before I sort of claim that you can go to Mars on it or something.
Good place.
All right. Thank you, Kathleen.
You, Geoff.